Good evening, everyone. It's Gordon Causey, as it always is. And today is the 12th of December. It is Thursday, December 12th, starting closer to my usual time, as opposed to like last night where I started darn near midnight. It's now 9:29. Actually, according to the clock on my computer, 9:29. I actually started a minute early. But all anyone is going to miss if they're coming on right at 10:30 at 9:30 is Candy the Wonder Pup jumping all over me and she's already, I got it in a pocket here. She's already sticking her nose in the pocket of my jacket to get her treat. Because for anyone new, if you've never been on this stream before, I start all my videos with giving my dog a treat, or pretty much all of them, 99%. So she shakes a paw, she lays down. Speak, speak. All right, come on up, get your treat, show everyone your pretty face. Good girl. All right, Candy the Wonder Dog. I'm not. I don't want to diverge too much, Sharunian. Sharunian's asking me my thoughts on getting Candy's teeth removed. I guess that was a joke. All right. It took me a second to catch on that it was a joke. When you're looking just at text, words on a screen, intonation means a lot. It's hard to convey sarcasm just with typing. Before I really get rolling, I'm sitting at 1,099 subscribers. I want to say thank you to each and every person who has subscribed. I know that a lot of people subscribe and then don't regularly consume the content. It's all good. But I would encourage anyone, if you do enjoy the content I put out, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel. The likes help because, from what I understand, I'm no technical genius by any stretch of the imagination. But from what I understand, at least what I hear all the time, is that it, quote unquote, defeats the algorithms that channels such as my own that don't have a big footprint, every little bit helps. So I'm injecting my voice into the public sphere, into the public square, sharing my thoughts, views, and opinions. If you are new, this is a miserable, pathetic little YouTube station. No fancy graphics, no professional lighting, no professional mic, just an old laptop. And the inboard mic, the inboard camera, bare bones basic. And and I like doing it that way because, to my mind, it speaks to a degree of authenticity. It's not dressed up. I use the term lipstick on a pig. I am what I am. It is what it is. And if you enjoy the content, I see I already have 5 thumbs up. Thank you very much. You only get to give me one, though, unfortunately. No stuffing the ballot box, as it were. And I'm going to be doing a bit of introspection tonight. So I'm going to be going down my life journey. And I think there's a famous person once said, I believe, that an unexamined life is not worth living. And examination can be painful at times, because if you're honest with yourself, you'll realize the times when you messed up. And I think anyone of broken, fallen humanity who looks in the mirror honestly at themselves will realize that on numerous occasions you messed up. And I'm not exactly sure how to get rolling. Back in August of 2021, I was baptized. I am a professing Bible-believing Christian. I will apologize right now because I will admit, mea culpa, I am guilty. The title to this, about Jesus, the Essene, or Essene, however you want to pronounce it, the truth about the resurrection, or the truth about the crucifixion and the resurrection, that title is, and was when I put it up, fully intended to be clickbait. I'm hoping to attract some views. And so I figure that might catch a few. And in the description, I referenced Billy Carson, this guy who has blown up the internet, certainly among Christians, for his false assertions regarding the Sinai. In my first video on him, this is the third one, and hopefully this will be the last on this topic. We'll see. I referred to he calls it the Sinai Bible. I was using the term Syrian Bible. The simple fact of the matter is, whether it be the Sinai Bible or the Syrian Bible, there really is no such Bible by either name, Syrian or Sinai Bible. And he referenced another book that he called the Gospel of Barnabas. Likewise, now that does exist. It is considered widely to be a fraudulent, made up, fictitious document. And what you can do is, if you want to understand that, you just have to watch the first few minutes of the debate that took place between Billy Carson and a biblical scholar by the name of Wes Huff. And I don't think Wes Huff's name gets said enough. Everyone's laser focused on Billy Carson, but Wes Huff, and Wes Huff he's not as big a name as Billy Carson, although in total honesty, I'd never heard of either Wes Huff or Billy Carson before this debate, and before Wes Huff basically schooled Billy Carson. But I can understand why people are attracted to Billy Carson, because there was a time when I myself was attracted to that type of content. I've shared my snippets of my testimony, my walk. I am a prodigal son. I walked away from the faith when I was 17, 18. It wasn't a, line in the sand. One day I was a Christian, one day I walked away. It was a progressive move away from faith, and going to university, getting a PhD in THC. If you're unfamiliar, THC is the active ingredient in marijuana that gets you high. Big time drinker. I was far away from the Christian path. When I came to Christ the summer I was turning 16. I was working at McDonald's. There was a youth pastor from a church called the Christian Life Center in Ajax, Ontario, which bordered Pickering, where I lived at the time. And his name was Warren. He would come into McDonald's with his Bible, sit down in the smoking section, and engage with anyone who would engage with him and talk Bible. And I've always been an extroverted person. I've always been a curious person. I've always been interested in faith. And so he and I engaged in conversation, and eventually he had me say the words to what is commonly referred to as the sinner's prayer, to acknowledge that I am a broken, sinful creature, and I knew it even then, and that I needed a savior. I needed Jesus Christ. I needed the light of the world within me. And I invited Jesus into my heart. And then I started to attend the Christian Life Center church. And I remember very well a sermon given by the pastor. And he basically referred to being a Christian. He likened it to playing a sport like hockey. If you're going to play hockey, you need to know the rules of the game. You cannot pick up the puck and throw it in the net. You cannot use your hockey stick like a tomahawk, cross check and stab. There are rules to the game. If you're going into the offensive zone, the puck has to go in before you do. The puck has to cross the blue line before anyone on the offensive team. The rules of hockey. It's the same with baseball, football, basketball, soccer, any sport, or football, if I have people watching from across the pond. And he, in his sermon, said, and this is the rule book. And I knew he was right. I knew he was right. This is the basis of the Christian faith. I'm holding it in my hands. It's a worn out old Bible that I'd been given by the church I attended when I was 8. I was 8 at the time when I got this. This is 50 years ago. I was brought up in the church, and I knew that this was truth. And yet I walked away from it. Why did I walk away? Because I wanted lordship over my life. I didn't want to hand the wheel to Jesus. I still had what I will call a Judeo-Christian outlook on the world, and it was still the basis of my moral compass and everything, but I wanted to bargain at times. I wanted to sate my desires. I wanted to live decadently on occasion, sinfully. These little bargains you make. And as I got older, after university, living in an apartment downtown, I continued to explore. I wanted justification for my rejection of the Christian faith. And so I started to read voraciously as much as I could. And I wanted, again, I'll say it again, justification for having left the church. And nothing justifies leaving the Christian church more than coming across hidden, secret information that sullies Jesus, sullies the church. And there, I was smart to leave. I'm going to read a few of the comments here. I'm not going to go too much down the comment field because I want to try and keep it on focus a little more than I normally do. And Anna Monarchy believes that my quote of an unexamined life is not worth living. He thinks that was Aristotle. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. All I know is it is not my own. The attribution belongs to someone else. And Danny's saying those who watched last night got the 411, had the 411. You knew it was clickbait at the start, I hope. And I've got XVB saying, bro, God's not real. There's no heaven or hell. Okay, you are entitled, XVB and everyone else. You are entitled to your opinion. I appreciate you sticking around and listening to mine, regardless, and I hope you do stick around. So one of the books that I came across, and I do not remember the title of it, but basically I'm going to expound on what it taught me. And I use the word taught in quotes because I started parroting what I had read in this book. Now, if you're completely unfamiliar with the Essenes, that's the way I'm going to pronounce it, they were a monastic Jewish sect that existed sometime around 200 BC till about 100 BC. They were around for 300 or so years, and most of what we know about them comes from the fact that they were the authors, it was their library that was discovered at Qumran near the Dead Sea, the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. And this book that I read relied heavily on the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I've since gone back and tried to source out the material that they were quoting, and it doesn't exist, like Billy Carson and his infamous Sinai non-existent Bible. Hello, HM. And what the book taught me was this. This is what the book told me. The book told me that Jesus himself and his closest followers were Essenes, that they were members of this monastic group. Very wealthy, very powerful group. That's the way the book described them. Incredibly wealthy, incredibly well educated, and incredibly, that's about it. Incredibly religious, very monastic, very keeping themselves. And they were also, they believed that the end of the age was coming. And so, according to the book that I read, What they did was to orchestrate the end times. John the Baptist was an Essene. And to make him mirror the prophet Elijah, he dressed in camel hair and ate honey and was wild in appearance to make him an Elijah figure. And of course, Jesus himself was an Essene. And the objective was to bring about the Messianic age and to restore the kingdom to Israel, to the people of Israel, to restore the kingdom of Israel in its physical geographical location around Jerusalem, to restore the kingdom, the land of Israel, and to have a messianic or a Mosaic type figure sitting on the throne of David, and that was to be Jesus, and he needed to be crucified. And then they offered a number of, and I'll use air quotes again, proofs to substantiate this theory. One that they put forward was that when Jesus was crucified, that Pilate, where it says in the Gospels, how Pilate said to the crowd, as is our custom, to free a prisoner at the Passover, who will you have me set free? Shall I set free Jesus, King of the Jews, or Barabbas, a known criminal? Now, the authors of this book contend that no such festival could have ever existed because the Romans would never do that. The Romans were brutal. They engaged in genocide, ethnic cleansing, and they were a horrible, brutal people. And they would never have engaged in this type of, we'll give you back one of your prisoners. One of our prisoners will set free. Then Jesus was crucified, hung on the cross, hung on the tree. And while he was up on the tree, the accounts vary. You have to remember Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We have 4 differing accounts. And just as with anyone who tells a story, if 4 people witness the same thing, you'll get 4 different accounts with key elements the same, but each one will color it differently. Each one remembers it differently. The only way you get a lockstep account is if the 4 writers or 4 individuals conspire ahead of time to iron out any differences, and so that they can all say exactly the same thing. But Jesus was thirsty, and someone took a sponge on a stick and held it up to his mouth. This is according to the biblical gospel accounts. And it had vinegar in it, as I recall. Well, according to the authors of this secret knowledge that I read, it wasn't vinegar. It was something of I can't even say the word, anesthesiologist, anesthesia. It was to make him appear dead on the cross. And further, they said further proof of this is that normally under crucifixion, the Roman soldiers would often break the legs of an individual who had been crucified because the manner of death was typically asphyxiation. The crucified individual suffocated because they couldn't maintain their weight. And I don't know the physiology of it, but the story is that it collapses the lungs or something, makes it so you cannot breathe. And that as an act of mercy, which we were told earlier that the Romans were not a merciful people, but that the Roman soldiers would often break the legs of the individual crucified to speed up the death. And they say that Jesus wasn't on the cross long enough. Normally it took 2-3 days before the individual died. So they said it was too quick. And they say that holding up of the sponge lifted up on a stick, that it was some form of a drug, because the Essenes had amazing. They had wonderful medicinal knowledge. They knew hyssop and the properties of honey, and countless other what we today would call naturopathic or homeopathic medicines. And there is an element of truth to that. The Essenes did have books on things like, I guess you would call it herbology and such. And so then Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for Jesus's body. And another point that was made in this book is that the Romans would never have given over Jesus's body to be crucified, or sorry, to be, for burial. That they were, this horrible, brutish people, basically they were barbarians, and they would never have done this. But they said that the Essenes were incredibly rich, and that the Romans could certainly be bribed, and that Joseph of Arimathea bribed Pilate and the officials to recover Jesus's body, which the authors of this book, or the author, I forget whether it was one or more, said that the Jesus was not dead, but then was taken and spirited away and healed and revived. And on the third day, they presented him as alive, having rolled back the stone, having had one of their members go into the tomb to proclaim Jesus's resurrection. This is the story. And then Jesus appeared for 40 days to the disciples and countless others. However, the Essenes had not counted on the wound that pierced Jesus through the side, and they, in this book, it said that that was the fatal wound, but it didn't kill him for 40 days after. And I have to admit, in my 20s, late 20s, I forget how old I was when I read this book, I believed it. I was in possession of the secret knowledge. This would have been in the early 90s, and there's no internet around. I mentioned in my last video, I'm not going to go to the Robarts Library at the University of Toronto to fact check this stuff and find out whether it's true. And so I just accepted it blindly, and I liked it because it provided justification for my decision to turn my back on Christ, to turn my back on God, and to live a life. And I also at the same time started to get into things like this law of attraction. And Tony Robbins, if you remember him, Unleash the Lion Within. And it's this whole idea to build a person up and to make them think that you are everything in a bag of chips. And it's at counter purposes to the gospel message. The gospel message teaches us that we're broken, fallen creatures. And so many who go down this prosperity gospel path, the Tony Robbins, and there was Shirley MacLaine at the time talking about aligning your chakras and all this stuff. The late 80s, early 90s was a period when New Age thinking, Reiki, however you say that, energy work and all this stuff was absolutely exploding. And the understanding I've come to have now, and you can disagree, XVV, you can believe this or not, but there are forces at work in this world, dark forces that want to direct you away from the way, the truth, and the life. They want you off of the path, out of the way. They want you to believe lies as truth. And they want to lead you ultimately to death, separation from the one who created you. That is where it is. And XVV and anyone else, you are welcome to disagree with me. I'm not here to ram this down anyone's throat. I'm not here to scare you into lake of fire or anything like that. We all have free will. It's a gift. We have the gift of free will. And this is the only creation. A lot of people will ask the question, if God is all knowing, all powerful, all seeing, all wise, all good, all loving, all this, all that, if God is all these things, why are there so many bad things in the world? It's a common question that anyone who is an apologist for the Christian faith, you're going to have to confront it at one time or another. And chances are, if you engage in conversations about faith, it's already come up. And the simple fact of the matter is, it is only in a world with pain, misery, and injustice and things of this nature, it is only in this type of creation that love can actually exist. God had choices. God could have, he could have chosen to create nothing. He's God, existing outside of space, time, and matter. I'm not going to create anything. 2, he could have created paradise on earth with no evil, everything always works out. There's no pain, there's no misery, there's no suffering. Everything is wonderful all the time. And ask yourself, think about it, ruminate over it. What kind of existence would that be? There's a one-act play about a guy who goes to, he's living in luxury. Everything works out perfectly for him. Whatever he wants, he gets. There's never any pain, never any misery, never any disappointment in his life. If he goes and plays, shoots a pool hits the cue ball on the pool table, all the balls fall into the pockets on just one shot. It's paradise, and he can't handle it. And he turns to the gentleman who's been serving him, who's kind of been his man Friday, and he says, "I'm sick to death of this everlasting bliss." And the servant says, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it, sir." And then the guy says, "Well, look, if this is heaven, I can't stand it. Send me to hell." And the guy says, "Wherever do you think you are?" HM is reading, take a look at 1 Timothy 4:3. Does that not speak to you about things that are going on in the world today? Let's read it. Heather has shared a passage, Timothy. That's in the latter part of the New Testament. It's after Romans, after Corinthians. I don't know the order of the books perfectly. I have a general concept. Colossians, Timothy. Is it 1 Timothy? Yep. And she writes 4:3. Chapter 4, verse 3. Lovers of self, is this the quote? You're writing it. Take a look at Timothy 4, verse 3. 2, 3. I'm going to read more than that. Now the Spirit expressly, this is chapter 4, verse 1. Now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times, or later times, some will depart from the faith by giving heed to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, through the pretensions of liars, whose consciences are seared, who forbid marriage and enjoin abstinence from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, for then it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer. Word of the Lord, thanks be to God. I did have another thought as to why it is so easy, why I was so easily deceived. And the reason, it's because of ego is a large part of it. Everyone wants to think they know. I mean, I have XVV who's here to tell us that he knows the secret. He knows, he has the knowledge. And, it's ego. And that was the fall. That was the fall. You do not need God to tell you good from bad. Eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then you can determine for yourself what is good and evil. Heck, you can even decide what, I know I go on too much about this, and I'll get accused at some point of being a transphobe or something. I don't care. But you can decide. It's just the best example. You can decide what gender you are. You can ignore biological reality, and a boy can be a girl and a girl can be a boy. This is the world we live in. And ego. Satan stokes our ego. And it occurred to me there years ago, I saw a comedian, and the comedian said something to the effect of, "You don't know what you know." Seems a strange thing to say, but he explained it. And he said, if you take any person and tell them to write down a list of 100 things that they've learned, write down 100 things you've learned, and then point to that list and ask them, well, how do you know number 5? How do you know number 6, 7? Go through the whole list. And 90% of the time, the answer to the question of how do you know that will be, well, somebody told me. I didn't do any investigation. I didn't read up on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't speak, I think they were written in Aramaic, but maybe they were written in Hebrew or Greek. I'm not sure. I'm not a biblical scholar. And I'm not going to go to school for the probably 4 years minimum. And probably, if you want to get a master's and a PhD beyond that, then you're going to be at school for 7, 8 years. You think I want to put in that kind of study? No, just give me a book that condenses it all down into 200-300 pages, and I get to feel like I'm smarter than everyone else and that I can tell everyone the hidden truth. And that's what I think Billy Carson is. I'm actually grateful for Billy Carson right now, genuinely, because what has happened is this incident, this debate that he had with Wes Huff, has put a spotlight on faith. And it's put a spotlight on the fact that we don't know what we think we know. I'll give you another example. I just had to read up on this. I mentioned that I was baptized in August of 2021 during COVID. And those who've been on the channel will know that I basically thumbed my nose to COVID at every possible opportunity I had. And the reason I got baptized as an adult is because I came to view my infant baptism as a sprinkling, and that the only true baptism was where you're of age of consent, and that it has to be baptism by immersion, because every instance in the Bible that speaks of baptism by immersion holds that you go down into the waters of baptism and then you come up out of the waters of baptism. I'm trying to remember in the book of Acts where the eunuch is met by one of the apostles, and I'm thinking it was Philip, but I'm not sure. And they meet, and the eunuch said, "Here is water. What is to prevent me from being baptized?" And so they went down into the waters of baptism. And when the eunuch came out of the water of baptism, I think it was Philip, I might have the name of the apostle wrong, had vanished. And the eunuch continued on to Ethiopia, praising God as he went. And where did infant baptism come from? And what I learned, we don't know what we think we know. What I learned was that it came about during the Black Death, during the bubonic plague, when in the Middle Ages, when so many kids were dying before they could come of age to be baptized. And so Rome, who I've never had a very fond view of, I've never liked Rome, and so it made sense to me. Rome instituted this idea of infant baptism because ka-ching, helps them raise money. Your child's not going to get into heaven. And it is true that the church would not allow an unbaptized child to be buried in consecrated holy ground. And so there was an element of that. However, do some reading on it. And it's not as cut and dried as it appears. It looks like in the first, second century, there were infant baptisms taking place. Some of the second and third century Christian leaders, not first century, but second and third century Christian leaders, before Rome came along in the fourth century, Council of Nicaea, I now know the date, 325, says before Nicaea in the fourth century, in the second, third century, Christians were baptizing infants. And now I have a greater appreciation for the doctrine that exists within denominations like Reformed denominations, like Christian Reform, that say one baptism. If you were baptized as a child, you're covered. If you were sprinkled as an infant, you've been baptized. Good enough. I never viewed baptism as being a requirement of salvation. I saw it as an outward manifestation of the condition of the heart. Let me read up what's being written. I've got XVV is you're trying very hard to, and it's going to be hard to catch up on everything that's been said, but let's see what it says. And I'm trying to be as conciliatory and as fair-minded as I can here. Okay, so I read HM, had told me to read that. Then Hank Holiday wrote, "Why is Jesus Christ the only religion that is attacked and hated more than all the others?" Because we're Christians, anyone who espouses that view, everyone thinks they're more sinned against than sinning. I would argue that the religion that is most hated in this world is Judaism. That would be my guess. I look at the persecutions, and I'm not just talking about the Holocaust. The persecutions against Jews go back a long 2,000 years, pretty much. So, I mean, it depends what part of the world you live in. In the Islamic world, and this is the thing, we have to look at the log in our own eyes. And the early, certainly the Roman Church, which took on the mantle of "we are the church," individuals were boiled or burned or all manner of things if they wouldn't convert to Christianity. And then likewise, if we go all the way up to the 1500s, and we had a 30-year war between Protestants and, just in the wake of the Reformation, between Protestant groups and the Roman Church. And in Sojourner Didymus, who's not here right now, but it's the middle of the night in the Netherlands. The Netherlands was something of ground zero for the Protestant movement. That's why the Puritans, who eventually made their way to North America, to the Plymouth colony, they left England to escape religious persecution, and they went to Holland, to the Netherlands. That's why they wear those Dutch-style outfits during the celebration of American Thanksgiving. So, XVV, hate whatever you like. Christians are taught to meet hate with love, and I don't hate you for what you're saying. There is a God who loves you, XVB. There is a God who loves you. It's your choice whether you want to be in relationship with him or not. The simple fact for myself, intellectually, I cannot wrap my head around the idea that everything came from nothing, that nothing created life. Science informs me that only life can beget life. And this came out of the fact that Darwin proposed this theory of evolution that held that All life started with single-celled organisms that just sprang to life out of the primordial soup, and that there was no first mover. It was an accident. I do not believe that. This universe, the laws of this universe are simply too precise for this to have been an accident. If we change the parameters that exist, that allow life to exist, if we alter them even just the slightest in a few areas, everything collapses and life doesn't exist. So there is no way in my mind that this could be just a random accident. If it is, if that is true, that life is simply a random accident, well, then there is no lawmaker. There is no right. There is no wrong. Everything becomes subjective. Your truth, my truth, there is no ultimate truth. So the world in which we're living, that Satan loves, because this is his world, he is called the prince of this world for a reason. He has a large number of people. He has an army of followers who believe that you can be decadent. There is no right or wrong. There is no moral order. Everything is subjective. Existentialism, live for today because there is no tomorrow. So I'm going to read on. Hank Holiday, because HM thinks that Jesus is a threat to them. Certainly within our culture, Jesus is under attack. The Christian faith is under attack, and in some cases, rightfully so. There have been a lot of abuses. Religion is a human creation. The church I attended, Community Church of Glen Rock, I went back to it. I've mentioned this before. In 2019, that summer, took a family trip, my wife, my youngest, and myself. And one of the points I made was to ensure that our trip would coincide with a Sunday, because I had wonderful memories of that church. And I couldn't wait to go back and see a service. And so Sunday came, we went to the church. I forget what time, 10, 10:30, whatever it was. We went, and there was only one service. When my day, back in the 70s, there had been two, because the sanctuary probably only held 150 to 200 people, and it was crammed either service. And so I go back, and I'm gratified to see the parking lot just filling up, to such a degree that they have attendants, guys wearing the yellow fluorescent jacket, whatever, directing traffic. And I'm like, wow, this is great. Just like when I was a kid, lots of people in church. And so I walked up, I had my Bible with me. I got in the Bible there. So I was walking up with the Bible, and this gentleman came up and he said, "Oh, hi, you're new here." And I said, he probably said, "Hey, you're new here." And I said, "No, well, kind of yes and kind of no. This is the first time I've been here since, probably about 1975, no. We took a trip back when I was 12, 12, 13. So that would have been 1978. Somewhere around there, 1978, 79, whatever. I said, I used to attend here when I was a kid, when I was in kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, 4. And he's, oh my God. Oh, and he goes, oh, so you're going to the community church? And I'm like, yeah, this is the community church. And as it turned out, there was a non-denominational group that rented what they refer to at that church as Fellowship Hall, which is a separate building. So the community church owns the church. It's their building, it's their property, but they rent out their community hall, the Fellowship Hall, to a non-denominational group. And it was the non-denominational group that was packed. My old church, I went in, there were maybe 10 of us, maybe 12, and I'm including everyone. I'm including the pastor. And I'm like, oh my, and it was decimated. I mean, 8, 9, 10 people at the worship service. And my wife, my youngest, and I, we were like 3 of them, maybe a dozen at most. Many will be familiar if you've attended church. At one point, the pastor will say something to the effect of, share a sign of, greet those around you, exchange the peace of our Lord. Peace of Christ be with you, and you shake hands with a few people. Well, in this congregation with only 9 or 10 of us, everyone moved into the center aisle, and everyone shook hands with everyone, because there were only at most a dozen, including the piano player, the pastor, and everyone. And I later found out what had happened. There had been an event in that church, and that's not the right word. There'd been a scandal in that church. The choir director had been caught with inappropriate photos on his phone, or something to that effect. He'd been photographing boys in the choir, in the children's choir, and I'll leave it at that. And it had split the church, or it was a huge scandal, because the pastor preached a message of forgiveness, and a large percentage of the church said, no, that's unforgivable, and basically decimated the congregation. And so the church having a black eye in the broader community, a lot of people have been hurt by churches. A young boy who, something happened to him at that church, that God had nothing to do with that. That was broken, fallen humanity, but broken, fallen humanity taking on the name of God, carrying the name of God. And so I can only pray that, we're all going to come to the other side of the veil at some point. And I'm convinced that it's at that point that all the crooked lines will be made straight. I mean, it's often said that there are no straight lines in nature. That's another thing. I don't know if that's true. Are there any straight lines in nature? We're told that, and people accept it because they've heard it. But have you investigated it yourself? I haven't, but I've heard it. There are no straight lines in nature, and it seems to make a degree of logical sense to me. Everything I see in nature is always crooked and meandering and winding. But when we get to the other side of the veil, I believe that everything will be made straight. Everything will be brought into balance. There will be justice done. I'm just going to read up, and that was what I wanted to share. I don't know how much it will resonate with people. I don't know how much they will enjoy it. I think it's worth noting why a voice like Billy Carson is so pervasive and so attractive to so many people. But at the same time, even those of us who are of faith need to look at the log in our own eye. And have we investigated? I'm finding out so many things. Infant baptism brought in during the Black Plague, during the bubonic plague, when kids were dying. I had heard that. I accepted it as truth. Another one, we're coming into the Christmas season. Where did Christmas trees come from? Why do we celebrate Jesus's birth on December 25th? And many will tell you, well, it's because the early Roman church, or the early church, co-opted pagan celebrations, the pagan celebration of the solstice, of Saturnella, and other things. Well, and you've heard it, and we've accepted it, and we share it as truth, but is it true? Or could it be the other way around? Could it be that Christians started celebrating Jesus's birthday on December 25th because of a tradition in the ancient world that said a person would die on the day they were conceived? And so, counting backward from the time, the Passover, when Jesus went to the cross, and going back 9 months and coming to December 25th, and then with Christianity spreading like wildfire, and guys like Emperor Julian, who came after Constantine, who wanted to return Rome to its pagan multitude of gods, did pagans start to incorporate Christian celebrations to try and win people back from Christianity? I'll invite you to look into it yourself. It's a fascinating topic. So many of the things that we get handed that we think we know, and we expound on and talk about them like we're an authority, because we assume it's just accepted knowledge. Oh, yeah, the Christmas tree, that was Druids decorating trees because they believed that their ancestors inhabited would take up residence in fir trees or trees. So they would decorate them to venerate the dead. And these types of stories but did you do any scholarship on that? Did you research it? Did you look at multiple sources, or did you do like I did way back in the day and just go into the world's biggest bookstore where they actually had, instead of the old crappy Dewey Decimal System, they had a search engine, an early version. So when I was asking, did Jesus survive the cross? And I had conversations and I watched TV shows, and I actually did in the early 90s, sometime around 94. I was surfing the internet at my workplace. I worked at a marketing company, and we had a client who was an ISP, an internet service provider. There were so many of them around back then. This was one that didn't make it. There were hundreds that didn't make it. And I was surfing the internet with a 9600 baud rate modem, mostly text, thinking that I was reading stuff that, oh, this is the hidden stuff that we're not supposed to know. And some of it I'll grant. People do conspire, and there is hidden knowledge out there, but you have to be so careful and circumspect in today's world. And if you want truth, and I say this to XVV, take a serious look at this book. What was the motivation? What was the motivation for lying? If the Old Testament is lying, why did they paint themselves as being so horrible half the time? Generally speaking, when you write your history, you're the hero. American history, America's always the good guy. British history, the Brits are always the good guys. It's a propaganda history. Historians become propagandistic tools. In the Bible, the Israelites are constantly doing what is evil in the sight of the Lord, doing what is right in their own eyes. King David is seducing the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and then having him killed so that he can marry his wife. A murderer and an adulterer. And it's in the Bible. You would think that would get expunged. If you're going to build up David as the greatest king that Israel ever had, get rid of that section, but it's there. And this is why I believe it's true. I think it's one of the supporting elements that suggests the Bible is true. Examine it yourself, though. Everyone's got to come to their own conclusion. Let me read up the last bit. Binary speaking is saying God created science, and because he created us in his image, we have the ability to learn about God and his creation through science. I have always said that science is a worthwhile endeavor. It is the human attempt to understand God's creation. And in of itself, it's a worthwhile endeavor, trying to understand God's creation, gaining a better understanding. The only problem is that we then, in our world today, we think we can improve on it. Well, God didn't do a good enough job in human sexuality because unwanted pregnancy. So we're going to invent a pill that will prevent a woman from conceiving. And, well, what are the long-term studies? Well, we did a couple years. What about 10? What about 50? What's the societal impact? What does it do to the broader culture? Oh, we'll worry about that later. And you see these examples all the time. Thalidomide, women get nauseous during pregnancy. Well, we got a drug for that too. We got thalidomide. That'll cure a woman's nausea during pregnancy. Okay, did you test it on pregnant women? No need to. The drug can't break the whatever that barrier is between the mother and the infant. And then children start being born with underdeveloped limbs. They, instead of arms and legs, they have flippers. And the drug company says, well, it can't be our drug because some women who take our drug, their children are 100% healthy. So it can't be our drug. It has to be something environmental. Something else is doing this. And it was on the market for roughly 5 years. And then ultimately they determined that, yes, it was thalidomide, and that it had to be taken at a specific time during pregnancy. That's when it was able to break through this placenta barrier or whatever. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical doctor. You can read, but don't take my word for it. Read up on it. Yeah. So many things where we try and alter God's wondrous creation because we think we know better. You have Yuval Noah Harari, who's an atheist with the World Economic Forum, who says that instead of everything being directed by random accidents now with the help of AI, humanity can take control and ensure our survival into the future, because if we leave it in the hands of, there is no God in his worldview. So, someone has to take the reins. Yuval Noah Harari, someone has the reins, and you can do whatever you want. You can shake your fist all you want and say that God isn't real. God is real. You will find it out. But Hank Holliday writes that 1800 science was leeches and you don't wash your hands before surgery. And that was science. The idea of bleeding and the humors in the blood being out of balance persisted right up into the early 1900s, right into the early 20th century. There was this notion, and I have read, and again, as with everything I'm saying, but I have read that by bleeding someone, that then your body has to regenerate the blood supply, like when we donate blood, and that this regeneration of our blood supply, I have heard that this has a positive impact on the immune system. I don't know whether it's true or not. It's just something I've heard. How do you know that? Somebody told me. So sometimes it's like that bit about that book I read back in my 20s, my late 20s, about the Essenes. There were elements of truth to it from what I've been able to research since. And the Essenes did, within the Dead Sea Scrolls, there were books or scrolls written about herbology and about the medicinal qualities of different plants, herbs, spices, things like honey, and their curative properties. So there are always, every heresy has an element of truth. Every lie, propaganda, the best propaganda has elements of the truth in it, and that makes it go down. That makes it easier to swallow. Danny writes, no matter how smart you are, there will be someone in the room smarter than you. There's always a bigger fish. And HM says, or richer, LOL. I just was reading Binary saying one of her favorite songs, So Will I. I don't know that one. The one I've been listening to lately, I Love You, Lord. Oh, your mercies never fail me, and all my life I've been held in your hands from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head. Oh, I will sing to the goodness of God. I should remember more, but I can't right now. I'm just, Binary, Danny loves Nobody. by Casting Crowns. I love Casting Crowns too. Only Jesus. I don't care if they remember me. I don't want to leave a legacy. Only Jesus. Uh, You know what? XVV is talking about religion being outdated and everything. I'll tell you something. We're a lot dumber than we used to be 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 2,000. I think it was Socrates or Plato, one of the two. And I did study Plato and Plato. Socrates wrote nothing. Everything that we have that Socrates is purported to have said is given to us by Plato. There have been scholars who have postulated that Socrates never really existed, that Plato simply created this character of Socrates to keep himself from having to take hemlock, which ended up happening anyway, apparently. Plato was eventually uh, held for treason and being against the Greek state. I think Athens, probably, whatever city state he lived in. But at any rate, Plato wrote that literacy, he said, literacy, learning to read and write, dulls the brain because it takes away the ability of humanity to memorize large tracts of information. Because you probably heard the story, and I don't know whether it's, again, I'm beginning to sound like a broken record. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I can believe this, that in China, that people, because the Bible is often confiscated, taken away, it's illegal, Marxism, opiate of the masses, that people have taken to memorizing entire books of the Bible. And we have the capacity mentally to do it, but the mind is a muscle and it's atrophied. I talk all the time about how people have outsourced their brains to their smartphones. They don't even know their home phone number anymore. They don't have a home phone and they can't even remember their own cell phone because everything is contained in this handheld device. And so their ability to recall things, they haven't used the muscle. And they don't know where the information is stored in their brain anymore. It's all about pathways. It's all about, everything we take in gets stored in our brain. And it's simply a matter of, do we have the capacity to go and find that, retrieve it? And many will know, if I use this example where you have a filing system on your computer and you've got your work folder, and then under work folder you have 4 subfolders, and each one of those subfolders has 4 subfolders, and we've all seen this tree that exists. And we will create some template, we'll create an Excel spreadsheet, and we'll put it into the appropriate subfolder, but you have to go through 6 or 7 clicks to get to that folder. The Army was brutal for this when you had to find documents. And if you went and you got it that day and put it in there, and then later in that day retrieved it 1 or 2 more times, and then did it the next day, and then a couple more times during the week, you tended to remember. But if you filed it there once and then didn't want it again for 3 weeks and then started looking for it, you couldn't find it because you haven't cemented that mental pathway that takes you to where the information is. I hope I described that well. But anyway, Plato was saying that just the simple matter of being able to write things down would impact an individual's ability to recall things. Oral tradition is often better than transcription because when you transcribe, you can make a spelling mistake, you can inject your own word and replace a word, or you can misalign. But memory, in many ways, can be superior to the written word. I'm not talking about a photograph. I'm talking about just transcription. Anyway, binary rights. Do you know the difference between religion and Christianity? The difference between being a follower of Christ. And XVV says Christianity isn't a religion, and binary says no. Many people will tell you that Christianity is a relationship. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Follow Jesus. It's even Jesus to his disciples. Well, forget his disciples, with the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious leaders of his day, he took them to task constantly. Read the Bible, just read the Gospels. Jesus was constantly in argument with the religious leaders of the day. He said, you bind on heavy burdens, but you don't lift a finger to do them yourselves. You're all hypocrites. This was Jesus to the religious leaders of his day. I get the impression, XVV, that you're probably railing against something about which you don't know a great deal, and that's fair enough. I've done it too. We've all done it. I just talked about how I railed against how the Roman Catholic Church imposed infant baptism during the Middle Ages because of the Black Death, and that was crap. Wasn't true. It'd been going on in the second, third centuries before Rome even took over the Christian faith. Infant baptism was taking place in the very early church. So anyway, Binary writes, religion leave you, Binary is kind of having a back and forth with XVV. I'll leave you to it. HM. Binary is writing to me, what she's echoing what Jesus said. Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, and I'm paraphrasing, to love the Lord your God with all your strength, mind, heart, soul. Give God everything you have. That's the most important, the most important commandment. But then he said, the second is like it, to love others as yourself. And then he said, on this, all the laws of the prophets hang. Wow. Quite the conversations going on. I almost feel like I hate ending the stream because there's so much good discussion going on here. And Zombie Force, who I haven't seen for a while. I've got Hank Holiday has highlighted my name, so this is one for me. If the link don't work, this is the name of the vid. Eagle lands on man's shoulder. Eagles. So you must have put that up earlier and I missed it because there's just so much in the live chat right now. Like there's so much happening in the world right now. Quebec is talking about bringing in a law. Danny will probably be aware of this. Eat Me has shown up. He's in Montreal as well. About banning prayer in public places. What? Now, it seems to be targeted specifically toward Muslims. But if I want to be able to pray in public in Quebec, in the province of Quebec, and I'm probably going to go back there at some point. Eat me is a she. Je m'excuse, désolé, j'ai trompé, madame, ou mademoiselle, si vous préfériez. Jesus said, no one comes to the Father except through me. And there's this whole idea pervasive now, and this Billy Carson was big on it, is teaching you to raise your vibration. You can be God. You can command things. Command it. I just recently saw a video with him from years ago saying, don't pray, command, because you're God. Well, read the Bible. He claimed that he read the Bible from cover to cover. I honestly, I have a hard time believing that. I don't like calling anyone a liar. But given everything, given his history, But at any rate, I read it yesterday from Acts of the Apostles, Acts of the Apostles, chapter 3, with Peter and John going to the steps of the temple, and when they meet a man begging alms who's lame, crippled, and Peter says, "Look at me," and the man looks up, thinking, "Oh, good, I'm going to get some cash. I'm going to get some shekels. I'm going to get some silver or gold." And Peter said, "Silver and gold I have none, but what I have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk." And they lifted the man up, and his ankles and his legs were restored. And Peter and John make the point, it is not by us. It's not us doing this. It's in the name of Jesus Christ that this has been done, the one who you rejected. And they brought people to God. They brought Jews to God. Binary is asking if XVV chose his name based on the Roman numeral system. If XVV, what would that be? X is 10, V is 5. It would be, well, it'd be a poor rendering of the number 20. V is 5, V is 5, X is 10. But Danny's writing that at me that the Quebec government is going tyrannical, just like Justin. They're trying to do what Francois Legault. He's directing. Quebec has to be just about the most secular province in all of Canada. Quebecers are by and large absolutely 100% totally they don't follow anything. It's the woke liberal capital of Canada in many ways. That's the way I view Quebec. And so they were under the thumb of Rome for so long, and then they had the Quiet Revolution starting in the 50s going on into the 60s, and they threw off the shackles of Rome, and now they've been wandering in the wilderness, and they're continuing to wander in the wilderness, and they want nothing to do this whole secular bill that banned the wearing of religious symbols because they don't like people wearing the hijab or the niqab, and so they banned that from government workplaces, including teachers, government clerks, etc. Anyone who works in the public space is not allowed to wear any religious clothing or symbols. So a Christian isn't allowed to wear their cross. And a Sikh, I wonder, is a Sikh allowed to wear his turban? I don't know. It's crazy what's going on in Quebec. Danny says, I am awake, not woke. At any rate, I'm going to wind it up now. I've been going on for almost an hour and 15 minutes. Most of it toward the end has been disjointed. I think I stayed on track for the most part until I wrapped up. HM's asked me to have a great night, and you're welcome for the stream. I appreciate everyone who came on. Maybe we'll see if I got that extra. Did I make it to 1,099 subscribers? Will I make it to 1,100? We'll see. I think it'll happen eventually. I do have a joke to tell, but I'm going to save that for another video. I'm going to do just a joke video. It'll be short, and it's one I picked up from my 11-year-old. And it's actually a series of riddles that tie together into a joke that's made me laugh out loud. Oh, wait a minute. XVV is saying that a creator does exist. Your God doesn't, but they're very similar. Your God is a personification of the creator. Well, this is XVV. I speak to this often. The fact that, we use this word God, but it is such a limiting term. I would invite you to read the beginning of Exodus, 3rd chapter, maybe. I'm not sure exactly where it falls. Exodus, 2nd book of the Bible, where Moses goes before the burning bush and he asks God his name. And God gives a very, God. And God says, I am. You want my name? I am. I am that I am. As Moses says. when I go to the Israelites, when I go to the descendants of the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when I go to Israel, and they ask me, what is the name of what is your name? What am I to tell them? And God just says, I am Yahweh. I am. He exists. God is such a limiting term. So I'm going to end it there. Last time I messed up when I closed out my video. I said this is from the book of Acts. It's because I mentioned Acts a few times. So that little pathway, Bible, Acts. Well, no, this is from the book of Numbers. And I asked you to receive these words, even you, XVV, especially you, XVV, because God's love is for everyone. So I ask you to receive these words. May the Lord God, creator of all things, Yahweh, the great I am. May the Lord God, creator of all things, make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord grant you peace. I truncated it. I got to say it the same way every time, or I forget those neural pathways, that I talked about. Good night. God bless. And I hope I encouraged one person at least to get into the Word. We will see. Anyway, fill comments down below and do subscribe if you like. We'll talk to you later. Good night, all. Peace.